Hello everyone, and welcome to our fourth event of Pride Week in EMEA and across the globe. My name is Alan Grimsley and I'm the chair of the Pride Affinity Group here in the UK, and I am delighted that today we are joined by a rugby legend and an absolute icon of the LGBTQ+ community, Gareth Thomas. So throughout June, we've been celebrating Pride Month at PayPal across the world, and the theme this year is We March Together. And there have been a number of events that have been organised virtually to celebrate the achievements and accomplishments of LGBTQ+ people, but at the same time recognising that there's still work to be done. So some of the events you may have seen, on Monday we started with Dan interviewing Xavier Bettel, who is the openly gay Prime Minister of Luxembourg, and it was so interesting listening to his stories about being an openly gay world leader. And on Tuesday, we had a powerful and inspirational talk given to us by leadership training company Dare to Lead. Yesterday, well, it wouldn't be Pride without a bit of fun, and that's what we had during our Pride Unplugged event, where we listened to poetry, music, and a performance by Leslie Roy, who of course represented Ireland in the Eurovision Song Contest this year. And today we have Gareth Thomas. So interviewing Gareth is Cam McLean. Himself, of course, is a big rugby fan. And Cam is our SVP of Europe and Australia Enterprise and Growth Markets. Before we start and before I hand over to Cam and Gareth, we have a video to show of Gareth's best bits.
Out. Interception, Gareth Thomas. Thrown off is after the big man. What a chase. David James is outside. Gareth Thomas will go. Gareth Thomas, dramatic try for Wales.
Welsh hands on the ball once again. Gareth Thomas cutting loose. Gareth Thomas shows his pace for old man.
He's put Wales 24-14 ahead, and that's his 19th international try.
From controls to Gareth Thomas, this to equal the Welsh try-scoring record.
Now Wales can attack once again on the break, and it's Thomas setting himself free, the captain.
Start by Wales. Lovely hands. What a beginning. Gareth Thomas. Jones back to Thomas. Chip over the defence. Gathered in by Thomas. And Thomas scored. Thomas for the corner. Gareth Thomas gets there. And that's the one he's been waiting for. That is the one which breaks Ryan Evans' try-scoring record for Wales. What a turn he's been to Welsh rugby.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ellen, for that great introduction. And it's my pleasure to be beaming in live from Queensland in Australia. It's getting on midnight here, but I'm super excited and energized. I think Gareth gets a lot of joy out of seeing that first clip and outpacing those Australian players. So I can't remember who they were, but obviously you're a lot quicker that day, Gareth. But and one thing too, I'll be covering a number of topics today, but the one thing that I'm in Australia visiting family at the moment. I was talking to some of my old rugby buddies, and it's such an international world that rugby connects people together, and to find that I actually played against the Welsh senior team in a midweek match. That Gareth was his first tour to Australia in 1996 when I was playing for Victoria. I think you were only playing the weekend games because you were playing against Australia, but I remember one of my prized possessions growing up was one of the Welsh players giving me their shorts. So that's been in the McLean household a long time, but you've got plenty of shorts, actually, over 100 tests for Wales. So it's such a pleasure to get to spend time with you. But what's been amazing, we had a sort of a prep call with Gareth and just getting to know him as a person. I don't think there's anyone better as an ambassador to talk today about the topics we want to cover. And I think, Alan talked about Pride Week at PayPal, which has had everyone from prime ministers to different events, but having a legend, not just of the sporting field, but of someone that's been a great ambassador for LGBTQ plus, and really an inspiration, I think, is something that can, someone that can teach us a lot of lessons as we build an inclusive workplace at PayPal. The first, I want to talk about rugby a little bit, Gareth, and we'll get into it, and don't hold back. Obviously, being an Australian, the fierce competition over the years with the Aussies, the Wallabies versus Wales. But the first topic I wanted to ask was your nickname, Alfie, and I remember as a child watching that Alien TV program. Who actually named you Alfie? Was it a schoolmate? Was it someone at the international level? Why did you get that nickname?
No, it was from my rugby team, actually, growing up as a youngster. And I think in Wales, and especially I feel within rugby, like nicknames, they're kind of a term of endearment. You kind of 100%. Grow, you have a nickname and you grow into that nickname. And I always remember walking into the changing rooms, and Alf, which I'm proudly named after, which is an acronym short for Alien Life Form, which many people would think that's a crazy thing to be proud of. But I walked into the change rooms one day, and we were kids, and one of the kids in the change room said to me, "Oh, you look like that Alf character off the television last night." And I can always remember saying these words, because as they were coming out of my mouth, I kind of wanted to put them back in, because I realized what I was saying, and I just said, "Oh, don't call me that. I don't like that." And I just realized that the minute I say that, the realization is that I'm going to be, and you know what? I can honestly say that, right? Even in the newspapers, especially in Wales, if there's an article written about me as Gareth Alfie Thomas, if I walk down the street and somebody shouts Gareth, I'm probably the last person to look. So in Wales, I've very much grown into this Alf nickname. And for me, I kind of feel it's this connection as well, that people feel like they know me a bit better than kind of the politeness of Gareth.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows everyone in Wales, right? The person next door, and you think you know the other person next door. But no, I think it's great, and nicknames count in sport, right? And I think that's a great nickname. And I spoke to a number of colleagues saying, "Oh, we're speaking to Gareth Thomas," and they're like, "Oh, Alfie." So it's gone, it's wide scale. But we're before we get into some of the topics we want to talk about to make PayPal a more inclusive workplace. I really believe in bringing your authentic self to work and being able to thrive in a work environment. It's super important, and that's part of the reason why I've sponsored so many Pride chapters, both firstly in Europe, in the UK, and into Europe, and then in Asia Pacific. And in places like Asia Pacific, there's still a huge amount of discrimination in legal code. In so many ways, we need to do more to make the world more inclusive, but we do a lot, I think, as a company. So we're really, really pleased. I mean, when I heard that Alan and the team were thinking about having you as someone that could share their stories, I thought that's a great thing for PayPal, and obviously my love of sport, that would be great as well. But I think we march together is the really, really important theme, and getting to know you, I think I can see even more importantly why this is such an important topic for our allies across the business, how we think about ourselves, how we represent our customers, because we need to represent the community at large. So it's really, really important. But we'll go there shortly. So rugby first. When you look back over your career, what are the moments, maybe one or two, that really outshine the rest? And you had so many memorable moments, and I saw some great documentaries about you where you were showing you're the first person to get 100 test caps. The presentation to you as a Welsh player, and such a rich history of rugby in Wales. But what comes to mind for you when you think about the things that really outshone the rest?
Do you know what? I think for me, when I think about it now, right, I look back on my career and I see all the individual achievements I've made, or collective achievements I've made, whether that be winning Grand Slams, going to World Cups, captaining the Lions, winning leagues. Like I feel that I think really hard and think, okay, which one of all these great achievements are my greatest achievement? But you know what, Cam, I can honestly say, and I say this with total authenticity, right, is that for me, one of the greatest moments was when I first realised what it means to represent your country in its national sport. And I kind of realised club rugby growing up, what it meant to the community I lived in. But then when you transcend, you know, your little community, and you realise that you represent 3.5 million people in their national sport. And Wales is a small country, you know, compared to Australia, compared to England, compared to many other countries, we are minute, right? But rugby is the one thing that as players and as a society, we feel we bat way above our averaging. Like, we should not be where we are in the world of rugby because of the funding we have, because of the players we have. And I always remember understanding, right, that people in Wales, a lot of people in Wales will go to work, to a job maybe they don't like, right, because it gives them the funding to be able to go and watch rugby on a Saturday. And then if you represent Wales on a Saturday and you're successful, then you know what, then people still go to jobs that they don't like, but they go to jobs that they don't like with a smile on their face, or like a bit of a spring in their step. And it was understanding the ability you had to have a positive impact on people's lives. And I never, when I wanted to play for Wales, like, I never really understood that. I never really imagined that. I learned to understand that. I learned to grow into it. So for me, without a shadow of a doubt, like, the greatest moment was that realization of what playing rugby or what captain in Wales, what that actually has the ability to do to transcend who you are.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, and I've been to, you know, many times to Cardiff for matches, and you just feel the passion. But I think that also, you know, has given you a platform to represent a broader community, and the ambassadorship that you've done for LGBTQ, and people listen to you. There's a you know, if there's a respect as a rugby player that can transcend the sport into community. So I mean, we'll get onto some of those topics, which I think's pretty remarkable. But just staying with rugby for the first bit, the best players you've played against, who would you say?
For me, yeah, for me, off the top of my head, again, right, it's two players. There'd be two players who played exactly the same position, but were so different, right? And one, I was lucky enough, I played in 1995 when Jonah Lomu first came on to the international rugby world, and he was probably the first player ever to transcend the game, to make rugby a global brand. And then the second player, who very much was similar to him, but in physical attributes was completely different, and that's Shane Williams. You know, you have kind of a David and Goliath. But what they could do, right, and why I feel they were the best players I ever played against and with, because I played for both of them with the Barbars and Shane for Wales, was that the reality that rugby is, I feel, like the ultimate team sport, right? Where you rely on other people more than any other sport. Yet when an individual comes along, that when in a stadium of 70,000 people, that person touches the ball, and all of a sudden everyone takes a breath in that stadium, or everyone goes to the edge of the seat, or everyone stands up, then you realize that that person is someone very, very special. And I tell you what, both of them people had as well as having great ability and great skill, they were the nicest people within rugby as well. And I think most people who are successful in team sport have that element of brilliance and skill, but they have to be nice people. They have to be decent people to be able to survive in that environment as well.
100%. Well, I was lucky as a schoolboy to play Jonah Lomu twice. He was playing number 8 for the New Zealand schoolboys before he became a winger, before he took the backs apart. And I got swatted aside like a schoolboy, and he was a man. So I know exactly what that was like. And I played against his college team as well when he played. Who are you talk about people being nice, who are the foreign players that you made great friendships with that sort of transcended teams?
Do you know, I suppose it's kind of a great synergy with you being in Australia, but a great friend of mine is George Gregan, who played for Australia. John Eales became another really good friend of mine, who again I've become really good friends with Sean Fitzpatrick, who is like the iconic captain for New Zealand. But what you find within rugby is you have moments after the game that maybe bring you closer to other people. But also what you'll find within rugby, when whoever you play with or even against, right, what that gives you is this kind of bond that walking down the street, you cross over the road to see somebody because you might not really know them, have this bond with them that you've maybe played rugby against them or you've played rugby with them, and that gives you the ability or the want to stay connected with people. So as much as I've got really, really good friends, I'm really good friends with Johnny Wilkinson, probably one of the greatest players that has ever lived. So as much as I've got great connections with individuals, I always make an effort that if I see anyone who I've played rugby or against, club or country, I will cross the road and I will say hello to them people. And you'll always have 5 or 10 minutes of reminiscing, and then just getting on with your day. But it's definitely a sport that binds people.
And just last point on rugby. I was really happy to see for the 2023 World Cup the players committee that's been announced, chaired by John Eales, who's obviously a huge legend of the sport, one of the nicest people you could ever meet. But the fact that you've been chosen to really represent the diversity dimension, and inclusion for all within the sport, I think is a big change, and it's a big step forward. What is there anything you can share on that Rugby World Cup has sort of thought about, and how you were approached?
Yeah, well, I was just approached by John. So I'm a good friend of John, and he was approached by Rugby World Cup France, and it's very typical French, right? Because I think French are very forward thinking. They always kind of want to do the best or be better than any things that have gone on previous to them. And I think what people realize in big sporting events, the most important thing to leave behind is a legacy. And I think a lot of events think that that legacy is all about just having good games, good venues and big crowds. But that makes a good World Cup, but the legacy is what is left behind. And I think France, Rugby World Cup 2023, have been really forward thinking in that they want to cover all aspects and they want to make it as inclusive as possible. So they've appointed myself, David Pocock, Yannick Josion, John Eales, Philippe Sella. We all cover different. Vinipola, Mako and Billy Villipola's mother, because they want to do the importance of the mothers of rugby players. Fantastic. So we all have our own involvement, and mine is around inclusion and discrimination. And they want to get every community that feels, because I think discrimination can almost come in a form of non-representation as well. And when we look at professional rugby, for instance, in the Rugby World Cup 2023, there's going to be a lot of underrepresented characteristics that will feel discriminated just because they're left out. So we want to target as many protected characteristics as we can and have them be a part of it, whether that be kind of telling their lived experiences, being at games, meeting players, making them feel like they're a part of it. So I'm really proud to be a part of something that I hope will be a legacy that will carry on through every World Cup in every country as well.
Yeah, and I think with the way the world is right now, one of the last overseas trips I did from Singapore was the 2019 Rugby World Cup, which was an amazing event in Japan. It brought community together. So I think the world needs this. All of the world needs to get connected again, and sporting events will bring people together. It's just a shame for the situation with the Olympics right now, and obviously the Lions tour. But let's move on a bit, because I think it's great to hear those stories. But the audience today is really keen to sort of get advice and sort of some insights. When I was preparing for this, I saw the program In My Secret Past, Gareth Thomas Coming Out, which I thought was really powerful. And actually, I think a lot about what I saw in that program about the sort of struggles to come out. You put on a masculine front in that community in rugby. You went through a marriage. The difficulty in telling your teammates and all that you went through. And a number of people on the call, the video today, won't really know your full story, but it'd be great for you maybe to start to share some thoughts around what it's like to bring, why it's important to represent your authentic self, because you, in many ways in that program and your story and your book, you talk about sort of putting on a front and not having, you know, the ability to be your authentic self. And I think that's a really important topic that we want to discuss today. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, listen, I think, you know, for me, I understand, right, the differences and the power between unauthentic and authentic, kind of with, you know, we can understand like privileged and non-privileged. We kind of get that. But so many people feel that being authentic sometimes just isn't worth it. It's just not worth the hassle that comes with maybe the announcement or the difficulty of getting people to understand authenticity. Now, being non-authentic, I am an example of doing good. You know, I played rugby for Wales. I achieved the only thing I ever wanted to achieve by being unauthentic. And then when I got to a point of understanding, for many reasons, personal reasons, professional reasons, when I realized that I can no longer be unauthentic, I understood and realized the power of authenticity, right? Because I, as a sportsman, you as people who work for PayPal, we have moments in our life, right? Really, really special moments where we think, right, okay, this is quite an important email that I have to write, or this is quite an important decision that I have to make, whether it's a yes or no. And same in rugby, you know, we have moments that define whether we're good or whether we're great. And then moments are split-second moments. You know, you feel like you train for these moments, but they just happen. So you don't even know sometimes that they come because they're gone. And I realized when I became authentic that so much of my life had been based on these moments. And these moments were me making a decision based 70% on me in that moment, and 30% wondering what someone else is thinking, or 30% wondering what somebody else is thinking I should do to be like the character that they think I am. And all of a sudden I started making these really authentic decisions. And you know, I could live by these decisions. And also I realized that making a wrong decision by being authentic, all that leads you to is another decision-making process that you will potentially then get right, because authentically that's where you're supposed to be. So I think, you know, and it comes in, you know, that's a professional aspect, right? And then I think when you take your personal aspect, you know, and we're all guilty of this. We're all guilty of sitting down and thinking, oh, you know what, I'd love to maybe wear that shirt, but I don't think it'll suit my identity of what other people think I am. So, you know, as much as I love her, I can't. The way we have our hair, what glasses we decide, well, when I used to have hair anyway, what glasses, you know, what you decide to wear. So I think that authenticity, that power in believing in your authentic self and the decisions you can make means that I believe means you get to, or you become, whatever it is you're supposed to be, but the best of that, not the 70% version or the 80% version, or sometimes even less. And because we think we are good by being unauthentic, so why rock the boat? You know, why tell people this? Because I'm doing good. I've got to a position that I'm happy with. And I at 47 look back at my career and I think, you know, I did do good. And there was times that I did some great things, but there was so many other moments where I wish I could have been authentic, because I believe I would have done great things, but many, many more times. And that, I believe, is what authenticity is. That's the understanding of what being authentic means.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think, you know, you are holding a lot in whilst performing at such an elite level, but not being able to share. And I saw in that documentary, you know, the way you described sort of explaining it to your teammates, and Scott Johnson, who was the assistant coach, an Australian coach, kind of pulling you aside and saying, look, what's up? What's going on? And then from that, it kind of unraveled. You spoke to the team leadership, and, you know, that was probably one of the, you know, hardest moments, right? To have the courage to sort of really unlock that 30%. That step forward must have been very difficult.
Yeah, and I remember, because I felt what I was given was I was giving away this identity that I'd created for myself. That was my safe space. And I think when you give that identity away, it's all of a sudden you give your safe space away and you become very vulnerable. And I think one thing with vulnerability is, you know, what I truly believe anyway, vulnerability is the sign that you're a human being. We all go around pretending that we're not vulnerable, defending ourselves against vulnerability. But the reality is it's one of the best signs of showing another person that you're a human being. And also when I allow that secret of mine to be told to other people, I remember sitting there, and the best thing happened was that when Scott Johnson, the Australian coach at the time, decided to tell a few other players, because he said to me, you know, his words to me were, is you can't do this on your own. You've got to realize you've got to change the room here of people who love you because of what you do for them. So let them do something for you. And it was the sort matter-of-fact way that when I was greeted by the players he had told, I remember thinking to myself, they just tapped me on the back and was like, literally, is that it? Have you been going through all of this just for this? There's no need. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, do you know what? I did this, or I never said this. I never spoke about my sexuality because I didn't ever want to be discriminated. And I spoke about my sexuality because I never wanted to be celebrated. All I ever want is equality. That is all I ever wanted. And I think some people feel like people say it because they want to be celebrated. Like they don't say it because they don't want to be discriminated. But we fight for equality. And when people were very the same with me as they all already were, that was when I realized what equality was, like the power of feeling inclusive and having that equality by not being celebrated, but also by not being discriminated against either.
And I think, you know, the culture that you grew up through, that masculine sort of rugby community, the sort of, you talked about the jokes, you know, the gay jokes in the change rooms, it was really quite courageous, you know, and probably changed a lot of the way people think about the sport and inclusiveness in the sport, just by being strong enough to sort of, you know, to come out. And one of the topics that we're really keen to make sure we foster, you know, great strength at PayPal is the allyship, you know, and you just talked about Scott Johnson, but were there other allies that you looked to that really helped? You know, obviously you were dealing with your parents. There's a bunch of different elements to your total life. It wasn't just sport. How were friends or people that you didn't expect come out and be allies to help you, and people that you probably didn't expect really step forward for you?
Yeah, do you know, I am very lucky and I'm very blessed. You know, we live in a world where there's 69 countries in this world it's illegal to be gay. I gladly do not live in one of them. So I have that on my side. I have a really good group of friends and I have a really good family, and not a lot of people have that. But you know what? I think the best message I can say on this allyship was there were people doing things that I didn't really know about, right? So when I spoke to people, everybody reacted in a certain way. People reacted in a positive way. But what I hadn't realized, right, was that people had been better than reactive, because what they had been proactive. Now we live in a society, or we live in a workplace, we feel where, you know what, to be a good ally is good to react. So if somebody calls out discrimination, you put your hand up, you say something to somebody else, and everybody goes, that's what an ally is about. And that isn't wrong, but also what we need to get to, and what so many people did for me, is we need to be proactive to create an environment where we never have to react. So we've created an environment where people understand that they can be who they want to be without fear of discrimination, where people realize what language they can use, but more importantly, what language they can't use, what gestures they can do, but more importantly, what gesturing they can't do. And so much happened after that made me realize that we not need to start living in a society that's proactive. Okay, so many of my friends had done so much to prepare for this moment without me even knowing. But I always remember a meeting I had with the Welsh Rugby Union, like 2 days after I spoke openly about my sexuality, and they said to me, they called me and they said, look, we want to congratulate you on your announcement. We've sent charters to every club, every region, 0 tolerance for homophobic abuse. Is there anything else we can do? And I remember sitting there and saying to them, you know what, I appreciate this, because you didn't need to do this for me, and I appreciate it. And is there anything else you can do? No, there isn't. But I feel you could have done this 6 months earlier. You could have done this 6 years earlier. You could have created this environment for me to not have contemplated and tempted suicide so many times because I was afraid of not knowing what was waiting for me after this announcement. So I wish they had been proactive to have created that environment where I'd known. But for so many of my friends, so many of my close family who, yes, reacted, but were also kind of proactive in creating an environment for me to feel like, you know what, I kind of know I can say this to them, and I kind of know that it's going to be okay. So I feel that, to me, when we come talk about allyship, is what we all need to address. We all need to realize that it's calling it out, but it's creating an environment where we don't need to call it out anymore.
I think it's really, really powerful, and so real. I mean, for those on the video call, I really encourage you to look at the documentary that Gareth made, because you went through some very tough times just trying to work through this. And as you say, if the environment had been better, but it always takes someone to make change, right? And I think you're a massive change agent, and maybe that was maybe 100 tests is a great thing, but maybe the change you're making beyond rugby in this world now will actually, save lives and do a lot more than just score tries. So I think there's a lot in that. But we've got US folks on this call as well, and there was the Carl Nassib news, the NFL player that's active NFL player that's come out publicly in the last couple of weeks. And what are your views on that as different sports kind of wake up to the reality of a broader society? And do you think it's a big deal? I mean, what's your thoughts now that you were one of the pioneers? Now other sports are kind of, which traditionally haven't shown that that vulnerable side or that authentic side, are now starting to move forward. What would you think? Yeah,
listen, I probably, like everyone else, don't want it to be a big deal. But the reality is, right, this is the reality. What is it today? It's the 1st of July today, 2021, right? And people, I heard a couple of interviews of an American TV, and people are saying, why are we even talking about this? It's 2021. Why are we even talking about this? And I'm like, do you know what? I'll tell you why we are talking about it. It's because it might be 2021, but we haven't got in some time teleport and move forward. Because in the 1st of July 2021, if anyone on this call, right, can name me, and let's understand first of all, right, where sports people lie in this world. They are some of, if not the most powerful people on this planet. They demand column inches. They demand airtime. Everybody wants to know what they're doing, when they're doing it. So they are high profile. So we all know sports people. And the fact that on the 1st of July 2021, we sit here and we can't name 5, 10, you definitely can't, top active gay male or female sports people participating in sport right now, off the top of our heads, understanding the platform that these people have, means that we are underrepresented, and means that there's a problem. Because diversity and inclusion, every organization, every government, from UEFA to the NFL, they will all say that they are active in creating environments for everybody. Yet we are underrepresented. So yes, it's a big deal, because what that announcement does, it makes people aware in sport of differences. But more importantly, I think the real power behind that message is is what that message did is, you know, some kid, maybe in America, somewhere in the world, one kid, I'm sure way more, but one kid wakes up on that morning and, you know what, feels a little bit better about himself or herself, feels like they belong, feels like what they are isn't wrong, because they have somebody to look up to. They have a role model. And, you know, the LGBTQ plus community within sport is so lacking role models. So as much as I don't want it to be a big deal, you know, we have to make it a big deal. And I think for people to keep saying, why is it a big deal? Then that, to me, actually is kind of a form of discrimination, because they don't understand, they don't know. They look at it and saying, in a perfect world, I don't want it to be news, but people are creating this perfect world where just because within their bubble or within their lifestyle or within their kind of home life, there isn't this subject, there isn't this issue, so it therefore it doesn't exist. You know, the reality is, like I said earlier, 69 countries in this world, it's still illegal to be gay in. The last football World Cup was held in Russia, where, you know, LGBT discriminations are all-time high. The next football World Cup is in Qatar, where it's illegal to be gay. Absolutely. So sporting power needs to do more to understand their actions have very powerful negative reactions and consequences.
I mean, I completely agree. And, you know, awareness can also lead to a path to acceptance. And, you know, that's to your point, that if it can change one life, that's a great thing. But we've seen sports people like Lewis Hamilton with Black Lives Matter, you know, really start to become spokespeople. You know, as a company, PayPal has invested and supported minority business groups in the Black community. Just yesterday, we came out and pledged $108 million to help gender equality. So the UN pledge to support equality with women and girls. So there's a lot of action. I think corporations have a big part to play in society, and they need to live their values. So I think that's a really important topic. The other topic I wanted to talk about was, you know, not just coming out with your sexuality, but more recently in 2019, coming out in the public with your HIV positive position, and sort of the stigma in society that may still be there, and the positive change that you're making. And I loved the sort of simple message that you went out with around sort of controlling the narrative, but you made a very big, very important statement around HIV didn't weaken you, that you were in control of your life, and your life, you know, your life was not over. And, you know, in parallel to that, you started doing the Ultra Ironman, you know, physical challenge, and just, I mean, to prove a point as well about the way medical science is today and how, you know, you can live your life normally. What were you thinking at the time? Obviously, you know, you're a very courageous person. Without a shadow of a doubt, you push the agenda forward. But I think that's a really powerful thing that you've done for that, you know, part of maybe stigma in society. So how do you feel that you've gone on that path since 2019? And obviously that was another difficult step forward.
Yeah, listen, it was something, first of all, I need to say that I never wanted to tell anybody else, because, you know, I think around my sexuality, why I wanted that to be public was because I wanted to walk down the street hand in hand with my husband and feel okay about it, you know, not be social media'd and outdid. But I think when it came to my HIV status, it's my medical history, you know, it's mine to keep, right? So there was a time where I thought I never wanted to tell anybody this. Now, why I decided to tell people it was because I found living alone with not telling anybody actually added to the stigma, meant that I was justifying the fact that I wouldn't be accepted by people. So I started to tell people, and then one person who I told, I realized that they knew that this information was something that I didn't want made public, so they used that as a force of blackmail towards me to say, well, if you don't tell me, I'll tell the press. And then again, that force of blackmail created the stigma, because you don't blackmail people over something, you know, that you feel is something that's positive for them. So then what I decided to take control of the narrative, right? I decided to take control of my own story. And what I wanted to do was, I realized why I was afraid, and that's because I was a version of self-stigma. So I realized we lived in a world where, or at least in the UK, where we have access to medicine, live in a society and in a country where if I take effective medication, which is 1 tablet a day, it means that the levels of HIV in my blood are undetectable, which means that I can't transmit it to any sexual partners, right? So I knew that, and I thought, what a powerful piece of information. But I knew that so many people didn't know this. And what I wanted to do was, I wanted to make people aware of this, but I wanted to do it in 2 ways, because I feel as a society, and I go back to sport with a lot of my kind of teachings, like in sport, we learn 2 ways. So you can tell people information, they can sometimes absorb it and be able to act on that information, but some people can't take it in verbally. So what I decided to do was, I wanted to say, right, okay, as well as verbally giving you the information, I want to physically show you how living with HIV is not going to limit my capabilities. It's not going to define what I can, and more importantly, what I can't do. So I decided to do an Ironman, because I felt that an Ironman was and a public Ironman. So this is an Ironman event, which is, you know, one of the world events that goes around the world in Tenby in Wales, and it has about 60,000 supporters of people watching it. Because what I wanted to show was that I'm physically going to show you how it doesn't limit me, but also that I'm going to stand in front of 60,000 people, being physically drained, being emotionally drained from people knowing this, and I wanted everyone to see what people's reaction would be, and I wanted people to see what their reaction would be, because I think sometimes we can be celebrated by what we see in the mirror, or we can sometimes be horrified at what we see in the mirror when someone shows us the reality of you back you. And what I realized that day was I had great support, and as much as it was around the narrative that I'd spoken about my HIV status, what I found was that everybody related to the story and the knowledge that I, through no fault of my own, had been put into a corner and made to feel vulnerable, like we all have at times in our life. And people wonder, you know, I just can't find the strength to get out of here. I'm in the corner, somebody else is controlling my narrative, my life is controlled by them, I don't know what to do. And they applauded somebody who they saw put into a corner and decided to take control of his own narrative and fight his way out. And I think by people understanding that, by people realizing that, then, you know, the learning around HIV and what it is to live with HIV was getting through. But more importantly, I think people were feeling a little bit lighter about themselves, feeling like if he can do it on such a, you know, serious topic, a serious issue, then what's affecting me? Do you know what? Why can't I stand up? Why can't I call it out? Why can't I fight my way out? So I felt that was kind of the overriding feeling from like 60,000 people that were there on the day.
No, I mean, really, really powerful. And I know there was a lot of publicity, very positive publicity. I think the Prince of Wales, Prince William, sort of, you know, came out with very strong support. And I think that's wonderful, because it does prove that you can own your situation and it doesn't own you. And I think, you know, that sends a very powerful message through certainly the UK and broader. What, just some advice for maybe PayPal as we sort of bring this to a close on the things you've seen. You're a great ambassador for equality, diversity and inclusion. What are the things that we should, you know, are there any things that we should think about? You know, I think we've got a strong culture of acceptance and inclusion. We try our best. That's part of the reason why in Asia Pacific, I've tried to be a big advocate because of that. The legal code not supporting homosexuality, the discrimination that's everywhere. What have you learned working with other companies that make an inclusive culture? What are the watch outs for that we should think about?
Listen, I think a lot of this is to me, even if we're talking about organizations, we're talking about, it's just like when I used to be captain of a team, right? I sit in a room and I talk to 50 guys, right? And you give them this generic message, yet some of them don't need that message. Some of them it's not relevant to. So I think sometimes for me, right, I'm a massive believer in what I said earlier, right, of authenticity, and that's an individual stance, that's an individual purpose. And if you have that individual stance and that individual purpose, right, then you create a better environment for you, which ultimately means you create a better environment for the person next to you. And that domino effect is so powerful. And I think, to answer your question, right, it's because I think it's what I would do differently, right? It's what I would say to myself when I was 16, 17, sitting in the changing rooms. Like, I have a lived experience now that gives me the power to believe that this would have been right for me and everybody else, right? Was that to realize that we all, I myself, go through life trying to please everybody all the time, right? We all do it, and it's not a bad thing. That ain't a bad trait, right? But the reality is, and again, I've learned this, is that we ain't going to please everybody all the time, regardless what you try and do. So I believe there's something for an individual to realize that, you know what, it's okay for being disliked, for being authentic, right? But what is not okay is to be liked for being a version of you, of who you think someone else thinks you should be. And I think if you understand that, if you take that on board, if you put your own house in order, then everything else will just fall in place. Everything else will work if everybody does that to the maximum of their capabilities.
No, I mean, super powerful. And I think we try to encourage, people, the ability for people to bring their true self to the office. But we have a big community. We have 400 million plus customers. We stand for something as PayPal that we want to, push the positive message of inclusion broader than our employee base, which is about 40,000 people. But just to close it out, and this is, you're 47 years young. I was 46 on Monday. So looking forward, what inspires you now? I mean, you couldn't do much more in the rugby, in rugby other than maybe beat Australia a few more times. But what does the future hold for Gareth Alfie Thomas in the next 47 years, and what do you want to achieve?
Right. I know what I want to achieve is long after my time. I wish I could say I'm still going to be around to achieve what I want to achieve, but I think total equality globally is beyond the rest of the years that I've sadly got left. But let me tell you now, right? But I've created what I want to achieve is I've created, right, and I don't want this to sound arrogant, but I've created a life for myself that I'm very, very comfortable with. And if I want, and lots of my family tell me sometimes, please just do it. I can sit down, put my feet up and chill out for the rest of my life and enjoy my sea view and go and paddle now and again, right? But what I want to see and what I fight for is I want everyone in every walk of life from every country on this planet to have, they might not get there, but to have the exact same opportunities laid out to them, regardless of their sexuality, regardless of their religion, regardless of the color. Everyone have the same opportunities to have the life I have right now. That's what I want to see, that's what I want to see put out there. And like that is what I will fight for. Even though I have the life I've always dreamt of, right? I don't sit comfortably until I feel everybody else has the opportunity to have the life that they've always dreamt of as well.
I mean, that's very, very powerful and, kind of inspiring in itself to know that that's the mission, and you can be your authentic self and complete that mission rather than sort of suppress what wasn't you through so many years of playing top level sport and turning up to change rooms and not being able to be yourself, right? I mean, playing with people that didn't understand you because they couldn't, they probably would have accepted you, but you didn't have the chance to take that step forward. So I think that's really, really important. But look, I'm going to wrap here and hand back to Alan. I mean, Gareth, it's great. I mean, some great inspirational and knowledgeable kind of stories there that people can relate to, that hopefully we make a change. Hopefully our allies really move forward and support to create that inclusive environment where discrimination doesn't have to be called out because it doesn't exist at the heart of the culture. And I think we're on that mission at PayPal. We hope that you're a happy PayPal customer. Keep transacting with us, and we'll catch up soon. I'll see you for a beer in Bridgend if I make it down there. Ellen, over to you.
So thank you, Gareth and Cam. That was so interesting, so inspirational. The stories that you've told, Gareth, about your lived experience really resonate with myself, and I'm sure resonate with many people who've watched today. And I've received a lot of messages saying about how much people have enjoyed it. So thank you very much. But the Pride Affinity Group at PayPal, will always strive to promote issues that are important for the community and for allies. And we really want to promote a workplace where diversity and inclusion are at the forefront of everything that we do, and that the differences between people are truly respected and truly cherished. Now, Pride Month may have ended, but of course, Pride never ends. And it's so important that we continue to celebrate. As Gareth touched on, same-sex marriage is only legal in 29 out of 195 countries. 69 countries have laws that criminalize homosexuality. Transgender people have a life expectancy of 30 to 35 years old. LGBTQ plus people are 5 times more likely to have attempted suicide before the age of 25. And many of us still get called a slur by random strangers as we walk down the street. And this is why we need Pride Month. There's still so much work to be done. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending, and thank you for all the support you've given our Affinity Group during this Pride Week and throughout Pride Month. Thank you and have a great day.